Welcome to Provo Municipal Council meeting for this evening. This is Tuesday, October 6, 2020. It is 5:34 p.m. This meeting will be conducted entirely via electronic means on September 8th, 2020, in accordance with Utah Code 52-4-2074. The council chair, George Handley, determined that conducting meetings of the municipal council with an anchor location such as the municipal council chamber presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present there. These are the facts upon which Mr. Handley has made this determination. Utah has been in a declared state of emergency due to COVID-19 since March 6, 2020, a disease outbreak which the World Health Organization has characterized as a pandemic. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention state that COVID-19 is easily spread from person to person between people who are in close contact with one another. The spread is through respiratory droplets when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks, and it may be spread by people who are non-symptomatic. Federal, state, and local authorities have recommended that individuals limit public gatherings, wear face masks, and follow social distancing guidelines. The Provo City Council has adopted a local mask requirement in indoor areas accessible to the public, including without limitation businesses and city buildings where social distancing is not possible, reasonable, or prudent. As reported by the Utah Department of Health, reported COVID-19 cases as measured by the number of cases per 100,000 people in Provo continue to rise at a significantly higher rate than reported rates for the county and the state. Physical distancing measures will be difficult to set up and maintain in the Provo Municipal Council chamber. Additionally, the chair of the governing board of the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City has determined that its meetings are subject to the same risks and has adopted the same procedures as the municipal council. This meeting will be available to the public for live broadcast and on-demand viewing at youtube.com/Provo City Council. The council requests that attendees help maintain the decorum of the meeting by silencing electronic devices and being respectful to others, and to wait to speak until called on by the council chair. In the current situation where the meeting is being held via Zoom webinar and broadcast over YouTube, I remind you to turn off your mics when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. I will state the names of those who are present for the purposes of a roll call. My name is George Handley. I'm the chair. I'm joined of the council. I'm joined by Dave Harding, vice chair, and other council members, Bill Fillmore, Dave Sewell, Shannon Ellsworth, Dave Shipley, and Travis Hoban. We're also joined by Mayor Michelle Kafusi, Brian Jones, our council attorney, and Cliff Strachan, our executive director for the council, and other staff who are assisting us with this meeting. I don't know if we'll be joined shortly by Wayne Parker, our chief administrative officer. I assume so. We'll begin with an opening prayer offered by Mr. Bill Fillmore. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance provided by Dave Sewell.
Our Father in heaven, we bow before thee this evening, Father, and to give thanks for the privileges and blessings that we enjoy in this fair city and in our country. We thank thee, Father, for the history of constitutional law and the love of country that has preceded us for generations. We pray that thou might bless us in our efforts to perpetuate those principles that are divinely ordained. We thank thee for the opportunity we have to serve in our positions, and pray that thou might bless us with wisdom and insight. We pray that by thy Spirit we might make good decisions and do that which is best for our people. We ask thy blessing not only upon the city council and our staff, but on the mayor of our city and in her good staff. And I ask that thou will guide us and bless us throughout the ensuing meeting. And we do so with thanksgiving in our hearts for our many blessings. And in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. Mr. Sewell.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Sewell. We do, to begin our meeting here, we do have a couple of presentations to make, and I see that we are joined happily by our colleague Wayne Parker, and that's because, I'm happy about that because we want to celebrate him for a moment. Mr. Parker has received an important award that we want to recognize. In Provo City's form of government, the council relies heavily on certain administrators to facilitate communication between the council and administrative offices, and it is not an easy balance to maintain, especially with changes in elected officials over time. We'd like to recognize someone who has been exemplary in his service to Provo City in this regard and was recently honored by the International City County Management Association with the 2020 Award for Career Excellence. I'm not sure, but I think that makes him the best Chief Administrative Officer on the planet. We certainly think so. Wayne Parker has been Provo City's Chief Administrative Officer for the past 3 mayors and has truly been an invaluable asset to those of us on the legislative side as well. His institutional knowledge, professional expertise, and calming demeanor are greatly appreciated by all who know him. More information about Wayne and this award are in a recent article by the Daily Herald, which you may have seen, but we wanted to take a moment this evening to congratulate Wayne on this award and recognize him for his invaluable and ongoing contributions to our great city. And you will see here projected an image of the award itself. So we want to, if we were all together in a room, we would burst into applause and there'd be cheering and hooting. But love you and appreciate you, Wayne, very much. And we know this is a very deserved honor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is an honor and it's much appreciated. It's getting increasingly awkward, however. So, thank you for the recognition this evening. It's a privilege to work with you.
we like to embarrass you. That's good.
Thank you.
Glad we succeeded. All right. Well, thank you very much. We also have a presentation by Counselor Shannon Ellsworth commemorating the ratification of the 19th Amendment of the United States Constitution. This will be presented by Ms. Ellsworth. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't want 2020 to go by without recognizing this important anniversary in our country and in our state. The centennial anniversary of the 19th Amendment gives us the opportunity to celebrate 100 years of women's constitutional right to vote. In this uncommon year, we can honor the women who fought for women's suffrage and who promoted women's full and equal exercise for their right to vote and to participate in our democracy. In 1848, 1 year before Provo was founded, the Seneca Falls Convention was held. This was the first women's rights convention. One participant declared that 1/2 of the moral and intellectual power was missing from government as long as women could not participate. Decades later, the Utah Territory first extended suffrage to women on February 12, 1870. And just 2 days later, Salt Lake City held a municipal election. On her way to work as a school teacher, 24-year-old Sarah Young stopped by City Hall. She walked into the building, cast her ballot, and made history as the first woman in the United States to vote under a women's equal suffrage law. However, 17 years later, a federal act disallowed the enfranchisement of the women residents within the Utah Territory. At a territorial suffrage meeting in 1894, Martha Hughes Cannon advocated for women's rights in Utah, arguing that one of the principal reasons why women should vote is that all men and women are created free and equal. When the Utah Constitutional Convention was approved and included women's suffrage in the new state constitution the following year, Martha was the first woman in Salt Lake City to register to vote. Then in 1896, Martha Hughes Cannon ran as a candidate for state senate and swept the election. In August of 1900, women of Utah County urged the county council to reconsider its plan to nominate only men for county offices and held a Provo Ladies Protest. Alice Paul was a Quaker and a vocal leader of the 20th century women's suffrage movement in Washington, D.C. In January 1917, Paul and over 1,000 protesters began the unprecedented practice of picketing outside of the White House. Alice Paul and her colleagues stood each day at the gates with signs. They endured verbal attacks and physical assaults, and eventually the local police arrested them on flimsy charges. Alice Paul and others were sentenced to jail for 7 months because of their protesting methods. In jail, Alice Paul organized a hunger strike, but doctors force-fed her and threatened to send her to an insane asylum. Alice Paul's resolve never wavered. She said, "When you put your hand to the plow, you can't put it down until you get to the end of the row." After media coverage and public outcry over her treatment, President Woodrow Wilson finally announced his support for women's suffrage. But it took 2 more years for the Senate, the House, and 36 states to approve the amendment that guarantees women the right to vote. Achieving this milestone required a long and painful struggle. This victory took several decades of protest and agitation. Few early supporters lived to see the final victory in 1920. The early campaign for women's suffrage lasted more than 70 years, but ratification did not ensure full enfranchisement. Many American women were unable to vote long into the 20th century based on discriminatory state laws, and decades of struggle were necessary to include African Americans and minority women in the promise of voting rights. We can all honor these women and their sacrifices by encouraging women in our homes, our schools, and our communities to register to vote and to participate in every single election. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. And in Provo, we need women making decisions in legislative and administrative offices, in boardrooms, and especially in the voting booths. Women's votes can change the outcome of elections, and women's voices can change the future." Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ellsworth. That was very eloquent, very important. We appreciate it. All right, Mr. Strachan, would you please give the instructions about public comment? I do see people who are already attending via phone, and if they wish to make a public comment prior to any of the items on the agenda, this is good instruction to listen to. So go ahead, Mr. Strachan.
There are 3 types of items for which public comment will be received. The first is the open public comment period. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for public comments on matters that do not appear on tonight's agenda. The second is for items that require a public hearing. For these items, time will be provided for all those who wish to speak. The third is for items on the agenda that do not require a public hearing. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for comments on each item. Because the City Council is meeting virtually using Zoom webinar, and this meeting is being broadcast on Provo City Council's YouTube channel, we have enabled telephone access to receive public comment, the numbers for which will be shown on screen during the meeting. Callers may have to try multiple numbers to get connected. When a caller is connected, they will be required to enter the meeting ID and enter the pound symbol. When asked for a personal ID number, enter pound. The caller will now enter the meeting as an attendee and will be able to hear the meeting while muted. If a caller wishes to speak on the item being discussed, they can press *9 to indicate their desire to comment and then wait to be called upon. Callers will be called upon by the last 4 digits of the listed phone number. Please provide your name and city of residence before making your comments. Each caller will be given up to 2 minutes to speak. A timer will be posted on screen, and a beep should be audible to the caller when their time is up. A reminder that there is a lag of approximately 30 to 60 seconds between the meeting and the broadcast. To avoid confusion, callers should mute the YouTube or Facebook broadcast to hear the discussion in real time. The open public comment period starts now.
Thank you, Mr. Strachan. So if there are any of the current callers who are listening in right now would like to speak, press *9. And we'll wait just a few seconds to account for the lag time. All right. Seeing no public comment, then we will begin with our consent agenda. There are several sets of minutes and 2 items on the consent agenda. Presentations, comments, and questions are not taken with regard to consent agenda items, but all are approved by 1 vote. Does any council member desire to remove any of the items from the council agenda? Okay, seeing no objection, then we will, let's see. I don't think I've done this many items before. So it's the approval of minutes, the Qwest Corporation CenturyLink franchise agreement, and the resolution of the Provo City Municipal Council outlining support for the Provo School District General Obligation Bond. And the minutes I should mention are from March 10th, 2020, August 18th, 2020, and September 1st, 2020. I will now call for a vote in favor of the implied motion to approve the entire consent agenda. I'll begin with you, Mr. Harding.
Yes.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes.
Gilmore?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Sewell?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Okay, that was unanimous. So we'll adjourn as Provo City Municipal Council. So if there is no objection, we will now recess, as Municipal Council of Provo and reconvene as the Redevelopment Agency of Provo by unanimous consent. I'll turn the time over to Mr. Sewell, our chair of the Redevelopment Agency.
Thank you, Mr. Handley. So item number 4 is a resolution authorizing the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City to enter into an interlocal agreement with several local governmental agencies to authorize the use of tax increment in the Center Street Community Development Project area. And this item is to be presented by David Walter.
Chair Sewell and other members of the Redevelopment Agency Board, good evening. The item before you tonight is to consider adopting interlocal agreements which would allow for the collection of tax increment to help with the financing of a project to be located at the corner of Center Street and 100 East. This is the Blue Sky development. It is a multi-use project. On the screen now you see an artist's rendering of the front of the building. Here you can see where the proposed site would be. Here it is right here on this intersection. You can see it's adjacent to the Utah County offices, the Wells Fargo corporate facilities, New Skin, the temple, and everything else that's happening in the downtown. Here's a picture of the current site. Most of it has been fairly old and in various stages of disrepair. As you can see, some of the buildings have got a lot of deferred maintenance there. There's a lot of cracked sidewalk, weeds growing through it. The utility lines are overhead and have not been undergrounded yet. Here's another view of the site. As part of the development of the project, they would remove the poles and underground all the utility cables, as well as make improvements along First, South, and Center Street to add additional on-street parking. You can see here's another sign with the poles that are going to be removed and replaced as part of the development of the project. As I said earlier, the project is a mixed-use plan. This is the lower level where would be parking. And then on the first floor, they have about 8,000 square feet of commercial space, some of it for executive office suites along 100 South, and then more retail-oriented commercial that would be along Center Street. This would be where the improvements, the parking would be happening here, diagonal along Center Street, and parallel parking here along 100 South, 100 East rather. So the developers had conversations with Pizzeria 712 about opening a second location within the project. And here you can start to see the residential units as they start to go up. This will be a 6-story project. There will be amenities located on the roof, and along the 3rd floor, there'll be an amenity space clubhouse that will be available for all the residents of the project. And here's the interior space with the clubhouse. We'll see an artist rendering of what it could look like as we go on through the development. Again, 6 stories, commercial and office on the first floor, a rooftop deck that'll provide an opportunity for residents to go up there and socialize, as well as enjoy the afternoons and evenings in the summer. Here's some proposed renderings for the clubhouse on level 3, where residents could congregate and relax. This is that amenity space on the 3rd deck that I talked about. It's not the rooftop deck, but this is inside, so you'd be surrounded from the wind by the rest of the development. And then finally, the rooftop space here as well. So there'll be some dining opportunities, a hot tub, places to congregate and watch movies. There'll be some stalls. They'll be created along the street frontage, as well as allocating some within the Wells Fargo space. And then, they are very close to the bus rapid transit at UVX stop, which is right here along University. It gives them adequate access to the front runner, as well as both BYU and UVU, so making this available for students if they choose to live here. The item before you tonight is to consider adopting interlocal agreements. These are the agreements that will allow the redevelopment agency to capture a portion of the tax increment. As the redevelopment agency, you would approve the agreements that would be with the county, the school district, the city, and the water district. These items would then be considered by each individual taxing entity. So you would have a companion item tonight that has the city council. You could approve the agreement that between the city and the redevelopment agency for that. The tax increment is being proposed to be generated within a project area referred to as the Center Street Community Reinvestment Area. This was adopted in 2013. Kind of takes the place of the Central Business District project area, which expired in 2015. This is the type of project we think that has some opportunities for further increasing the density in the downtown. It's providing some additional office and commercial space, and to continue the downtown redevelopment that's been going on for a number of years. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any comments or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Any questions for Mr. Walter before I turn it over to public comment? All right, I will.
Mr. Hanley, we'll get back to you in a few minutes after we finish these 2 items as far as chairing duties.
I completely blanked it. Yeah, go ahead.
No problem. Well, are there any questions for Mr. Walter before we open it up for public comment? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Walter.
Thank you.
We will now open this item for public comment. Now I see a list of phone-in listeners here. And can you remind me, Mr. Strachan, of the instructions for our phone-in listeners, what they need to do if they wish to speak?
Yes, for our call-in listeners, if you want to speak, hit *9 on your phone. And then when your number is called upon, there is one now, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll want to hit *6, I believe, to then speak. And remember to identify yourself.
It's
and
*9 rather than *6.
I thought it was *6 to get them to raise their hand, and *6.
If you look on the screen, it says *9.
Yeah, but to unmute, I think you have to do *6.
Anyway, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like you're currently muted, so try hitting *6 to unmute and speak to us. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, how are you doing? This is McKay Christensen, and I'm the developer of the project. I just want you to know that I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Christensen? All right. Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Do we have any other callers that wanted to make a public comment? Reminder to hit *9 if you wish to speak, and then hit *6 to unmute yourself. I'm not seeing anyone else.
Yeah, it's been a good minute or so since you started this hearing portion.
Okay. We will then close this item for public comment and bring it back to the RDA board for discussion. Does anyone have a comment or question on this item? All right, seeing.
I do, Mr. Sewell.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you.
That's all right. I just wanted to kind of mention, over the years, I've been a little concerned about overuse of TIF, of the tax increment financing tool. But in looking at this proposal, I think this is perhaps a very clear, good example of when this tool is appropriate. I kind of joked earlier that I think this project already has been in the works for 12 years. And that's the length of time that the tax increment is proposed to last. So we have seen this corner of this block really be dilapidated, kind of a drag on this area, and it is not producing much in the way of property tax. And so, and then the proposal itself, with the ground floor commercial and retail, the parking looks like the parking has now been figured out, so it will have sufficient parking, and is bringing more residential and appropriate residential into the downtown. So, kind of have a long checklist of what we would like to see in projects, and I feel like this checks all of those boxes, and really would turn around a blighted area. And I feel better that this is a project that would not happen without this participation. So for all of these reasons, I feel this is a good fit for this tool, and I'll be voting for it.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Mr. Fillmore.
You're muted, Mr. Fillmore.
There we go. I just wanted to commend the redevelopment agency, Mr. Walter, and for that matter, Mr. Christensen. This is exactly the kind of project for which RDAs are created. It's a much needed project. As David indicated, it seems to check all the boxes. Frankly, I would love to see a half dozen of these on West Center Street all the way to the freeway, and to beautify and enhance and make better use of that main corridor out to I-15. So thank you for this good effort.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. I should mention that the RDA Executive Board is in support of this, and I also wanted to mention that we really appreciate Mr. Christensen's perseverance over the last, I don't know, couple of years now, it seems like, and through several iterations, and we're excited to move this forward. Any other comments before I call for a vote? All right, then I will call for a vote on the implied motion to approve this. Mr. Hanley,
Yes.
Mr. Harding,
Yes.
Ms. Ellsworth,
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore,
Yes.
Mr. Hoban,
Yes.
Mr. Shipley,
Yes.
and I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes, also making this a unanimous vote. Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 5, which is a very similar type of resolution for the interlocal agreement, but this time for the Riverwoods Community Reinvestment Project area. And this item will again be presented by Mr. David Walter.
Yes, thank you. So this item, as you mentioned, is very similar. It is the approval of the tax or the interlocal agreements that would allow the redevelopment agency to obtain a portion of the increase in taxes that would be generated as a result of the proposed development. You may remember that this is for the Riverwoods area, which was a community reinvestment area which was recently created. This is going to primarily benefit Qualtrics, who is going to expand their area by about 166,000 square feet, and to build 2 structured parking decks of 500 spaces each in order to accommodate the over 1,000 employees they intend to hire for the next several years, over the next 10 years in reality. So Qualtrics was successful in TIF grant from the state. The state was looking to Provo to participate in this development. As you know, Qualtrics is a very prominent and very successful member of the Provo business community. They do have co-headquarters that in Provo as well as in Seattle, Washington, and they have the opportunity to expand and to increase their reputation within this space that they occupy for consumer and customer satisfaction. Qualtrics intends to hire, as I mentioned earlier, 1,000 people over the next 10 years. The average annual salary is going to be $80,000. So it's quite an opportunity for us to increase the daytime population as well as to continue to provide jobs, not only direct jobs, but indirect and spin-off jobs that will be created as a result of the employment opportunities within the Riverwood Business Park. Due to the cost of constructing the structured parking, there's going to be an opportunity for the agency to use this tax increment to reimburse a portion of that. And that will help provide additional parking that will be available for other businesses within the business park, as well as other customers and clientele of those businesses. They'll be able to use some of the parking that will be generated, as well as there'll be some additional parking on a remnant lot that Qualtrics is going to improve and make available. Again, these items, the approval of these items was the first step in getting the tax increment. I should have mentioned earlier in the last presentation that the tax increment doesn't come until after the project's completed, so there's no money being put up by either the redevelopment agency or the city to make this project happen, but it is an opportunity for us to help reimburse for some of those costs after the project is completed. This item will again have a companion item where the city, the redevelopment agency approves those interlocals with the individual taxing entities, and then the city would approve its own interlocal with the agency as a taxing entity. concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Are there any questions for Mr. Walter? I had one, Mr. Walter. I think I heard you say earlier that there was some relationship between the incentives that the state of Utah was offering and local participation, but I wasn't real clear on.
The state the state doesn't mandate that happens, but the state does look for the local jurisdiction to participate in providing some sort of incentive to the business. I mean, it's not a hard and fast rule that we have to do this, but this is an opportunity for us to kind of, assist a local business that is expanding, that is providing some additional jobs, that is, kind of I don't want to say the shining star, but they are a prominent business. They're well known not only locally, but internationally. And so this is an opportunity for us to try to provide some funding that would help them recoup some of their costs.
Thank you for that clarification. Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes, I remember this project. It's the parking structures, and are they next to the Provo River? Is that what I remember?
I don't know if I can call up I'm not at my desk, so I don't know if I can call up a copy of the GIS so we could take a look at it. But so this was the project area. So there is a map. You can scroll to the very end. The map will be, I believe, Exhibit A. So it is going to be, the parking structures are actually going to be over here, and then this is the existing Qualtrics building, and they're going to kind of mirror that for the 166,000 square feet. And then the parking structures are going to be kind of here and here. And then the balance of this site gets improved with parking as well for the benefit of the whole business park. So I don't believe that the structures are going to be over here next, which would be closer to the river, but it would be more of the building and the office suites.
Where is the river on this? Is the river not on the right side?
No, it would be back here.
Okay.
Wait. I believe you're right. It is on the right side. I apologize. I'm looking at it differently. So the structures are going to be over here, so they won't come as close to the river, but there will be parking right there.
Yeah, it does give me some heartburn to think that we are giving away this money to a great company, but not necessarily to create jobs, but to build parking structures next to the Provo River. That's not exciting to me.
Well, we can ask them if they have an opportunity to take a look at their plans and see if they maybe couldn't reverse that. So
yeah, that would be interesting. And is there some way that we can equate parking structures with jobs? How does a parking structure create jobs?
It provides an opportunity for those that don't take advantage of, as we talked about earlier today, there really aren't a lot of opportunities for public transit in this area. So those employees that are working here typically either carpool or drive themselves. And so that's where they're parking. So by meeting our parking requirements, they're able to develop the structure and to go ahead and staff those facilities.
So, Mr. Walter, is their proposal is probably just aimed at meeting our minimum parking requirements,
Yes,
would you say?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there other questions for Mr. Walter?
Well, I asked this earlier, but I would, and I guess at a future point, I would like to know a little more about their transportation plans. Given that this is about parking, it just seems like it would be helpful to know more about how we can work with them, and both in the short term and the longer term, to ensure that there's better public transportation options for them as they grow. Because right now it doesn't seem like there are a whole lot.
So we're certainly open, and we would actually like to see additional public transportation options to this area, because it is a highly used, highly desirable location for businesses. And so with those employees, it would be nice to be able to have some sort of program that would reduce solo driving to the site.
Yeah. Yeah, that part of University Avenue and 8th North, and just heading up to the canyon and so on. It's a major artery at this point, and it's already pretty congested at certain hours of the day. So it seems like anything we can do to reduce that is a positive.
Okay. Be happy to continue those dialogues and come back to the agency/council with an update later.
If there are no more questions for Mr. Walter, we would like to thank you for the presentation, Mr. Walter, and we'll now open it up for public comment. And as a reminder, I see quite a few listeners dialed in here. Press *9 if you would like to speak to this item. Seeing no one calling to make a public comment, we will close public comment and bring this back to the RDA board for discussion.
Mr. Sewell,
Yes.
I'm just not excited about this project. I know that Qualtrics is a phenomenal part of our city, but I feel really uncomfortable that we're giving money away for a parking structure. And I feel really uncomfortable that we're allowing parking structures next to one of our greatest community assets, which is the Provo River. So I think that if this does go forward, we should reevaluate our city ordinances and understand what we are allowing going forward within proximity to the river, because it's a community asset, and so are the dollars that we give away in incentives. So I have some serious concerns about this.
Thank you. Mr. Harding?
Thank you. I am also uncomfortable with this proposal, kind of as opposed to the last one that we just heard. As I was reviewing this and kind of preparing for this meeting, I wrote some stuff out, and I don't know if you don't mind, I'm going to just read a couple sentences here. There's no question that Qualtrics is an important part of our community, and I'm thrilled that they are expanding in Provo, but we should give our gratitude, not our tax dollars, as a thank you. Property taxes that Qualtrics will pay or would pay would go to fund the education of all the children that those new employees will bring with them. Property taxes help pay for the police and fire protection that the city provides to the company, its employees, and their families. Property taxes help pay for the outstanding community amenities that will help Qualtrics recruit top employees to fill these new positions. I do, looking at what their proposal is, they propose to basically double the footprint of their building. And to do that, they're going to be placing that over their existing parking lot. And we do require, at least a minimum number of parking spaces for the size of their buildings. And so in order to fit a new building on their old parking lot, they need to go to structured parking, which is far more expensive. From a land use perspective, at least in the short term, structured parking is much more efficient use than surface parking. And so even though this is tied in with a parking lot, I don't feel it's necessary that we're paying for the parking so much as we're facilitating or we're contributing to their expansion. You know, as I said earlier, I have some qualms with that as well. The other thing I wanted to point out, I could be wrong on this, someone can correct me if necessary, but I believe the property across the street, that the property that's adjacent to the river trail, will be kind of a staging area or a parking, more of a temporary parking for the cars that currently are there while it's being built. And then once it's being built, all those cars can go back into the garage. And so then this surface lot can then be used by the broader business park there. And from that perspective, right now we've just got an empty field, and that empty field would become a parking lot, but it's not a permanent improvement. And so it in some ways it allows that area to be redeveloped in the future to some other use. And so I think that maybe, I think that's better than placing, if we're concerned about how we treat the river, how we front the river, that's probably better than if the parking garage was going up against the river. It's less permanent and almost holds a place for something to go in there later on. So from those perspectives, about the trail as so much as just the expectation of tax increment for projects like this, where I'm not certain that the tax increment was the enabling factor for this expansion. And I understand, and we've talked about in the past, that the state does like to see the local buy-in if they're going to put money towards it. So I feel okay moving forward with this, but I'm definitely not excited about it. And I do hope that we can continue to be very careful with how we use tax increment financing, and I believe our redevelopment agency is hearing us and will be working towards the projects that the council is signaling that we want to support, or I should say the agency board is signaling that we want to support.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Well, we were having that discussion. I did see a hand go up. It was pointed out to be by Mr. Handley. And given that this is a little tricky, this public participation, we're going to go back and take that comment. So caller whose number ends in 5734, go ahead and make your comment. Press *6 to unmute yourself. It's showing that you're currently muted. So press *6 to unmute. Caller ending in 5734. I see your hand up, but it is showing that you are currently muted. If you'd like to speak, press *6. Apparently they're not listening to the broadcast. Let's see, I guess they can't see messages either, so
Mr. Sewell, what I would do is carry on. There's no one else calling, but maybe move on to the next. And if this person actually unmutes themselves in the next few minutes, you can call him or her back on.
okay. That sounds good. All right, let's go back to RDA board discussion, and I'll keep an eye out to see if this person unmutes. Mr. Hanley.
I had a question for Mr. Walter. With regard to the riverfront area, if this, I mean, will any design of the layout and the parking lot itself ever come back to us for review, or is that something that just goes forward? I guess the reason I'm asking is that it would be, you know, I mean, if they were to include some attractive ways to make use of that riverfront to encourage its recreational value for their own employees or for the public, so that it's not just kind of locked out as a result of the parking lot, then I could see that as a bonus.
So I know, yeah, excuse me. I know that they're in the process of designing that. We can certainly talk to them and see. I'm not, if they build to the standards that are in the Riverwoods business park plan, I don't know that it would necessarily come back before the council unless they're asking for some sort of variance or waiver from those conditions. We can certainly talk to them and see where they are and how far along, and if it would be feasible for them to make such a design change.
Thank you.
I think those plans and designs usually go to the planning commission, and that's where they're approved.
Yes. But it may not necessarily come back to the council, but we'll see about that.
Yeah, it might end up looking like the river by the Macy's parking lot.
I hope we can do better.
I think we could.
All right, are there any other comments, any more discussion by the RDA board? Well, let me just say that I am in support of this. I think it's kind of a rare opportunity to bring in a business that will have the potential to create that many jobs over the next 10 years. I am sympathetic to at least suggesting that they take a look at the parking arrangement as it relates to fronting on the river. But given that the state, even at the state level, they've attached such importance to this that they have wanted to participate, I feel like we should do our part to bring this to Provo. If there are no other comments, then I will call for a vote on the implied motion. Mr. Handley?
Vote yes.
Mr. Harding?
Yes.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore?
Yes.
Mr. Hoban?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
No.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes. So the motion passes 6-1. If there is no objection, we will now adjourn as the Redevelopment Agency of Provo and reconvene as the Municipal Council by unanimous consent.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sewell. We'll continue then to our action agenda. We have an implied motion. This is item number 6 on a resolution authorizing Provo City to enter into an interlocal agreement with the Redevelopment Agency of Provo to authorize the use of tax increment in the Center Street Community Development Project area. So this is the item we just discussed as the RDA. Mr. Walter, any further presentation?
Yeah, just to clarify that this is the companion item that I spoke of earlier that the city is approving now with the redevelopment agency. And there'll be a similar one for Qualtrics. So.
Okay. We call for public comment on this item if there's any public comment. Wait a minute. Okay, seeing no public comment, I will bring it back to the council for any discussion. Any discussion from the council. Seeing none, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. I'll begin with Ms. Ellsworth.
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore.
Yes.
Mr. Hoban.
Yes.
Mr. Steele.
Yes.
Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mr. Harding.
Yes.
All right, the voting is unanimous. We'll go to item number 7, which is an implied motion on a resolution authorizing Provo City to enter into an interlocal agreement with the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City to authorize the use of tax increment in the Provo Riverwoods Community Development Project area. Again, this is Walter, go ahead.
Again, this is the companion item for the city to approve that interlocal agreement. So.
All right, any comment from the public? I'll give it a moment. *9 if you wish to speak. No public comment. We'll bring it back to the council for any discussion. Any discussion from the council? All right, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. I'll begin with you, Mr. Fillmore.
Yes.
Mr. Hoban.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Mr. Shipley.
No.
I will vote yes. Mr. Harding.
Yes.
Ms. Ellsworth.
Yes.
Okay, that vote was 6-1 with Mr. Shipley opposed. Okay, we will now turn to item number 8, which is an implied motion on a resolution authorizing the issuance of wastewater revenue bonds of Provo City, Utah. This will be presented by Dave Decker, our Director of Public Works.
Thank you, Chair Handley. And thank you to the council, to the administration for the opportunity to make this presentation. This was reviewed, the same presentation was reviewed with the council 3 weeks ago in the work session. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on the specifics of the presentation. We're going to take most of the time and let Eric Hunter, who is the bond counsel for the city, go through the documents relative to the specific state loan. But just as a reminder on this particular item, the council directed us in late 2018 to approach the state relative to a loan that had been suggested by Erica Gaddis. She's part of the DEQ board and director at water quality with the state, and indicated that we may wish to make an application for a state loan, which we did. And the Department of Environmental Quality Board approved our request and granted the city a loan for $77.8 million. It included $2 million of loan forgiveness and also an interest rate of 0.5% or 0.5%. I felt like it was a very good loan. It has several other benefits to it. Why don't you go to the next slide, Jimmy? If we can go to the next slide, I'm not sure if John, there we go. And again, this slide is illustrating a few key dates relative to the loan, but in other presentations, if the council wishes, I can go through a number of other dates relative to the wastewater treatment plant, what led the city to the point of requesting this loan. And again, the offer from the DEQ board, I think, was very generous, very contingent upon the needs of Provo City, given the age of the treatment plant and the regulations that had been put in place. They were effective in, became effective in 2020. You can also see on the same slide in December, we requested a variance on those regulations, which delayed the date that the city had to meet the phosphorus regulations relative to the discharge from our treatment plant into Utah Lake. The state granted us that variance also. The variance goes to 2025, but it was conditioned on a number of items, one of which was to modify the treatment plant and make some significant modifications to the treatment plant and begin biological removal of phosphorus and advanced treatment of the effluent going into Utah Lake. And so we're asking the council tonight, one of the last significant steps relative to approving this loan is the council authorization and public hearing associated with it. Just very quickly, I'll go through just a couple of slides. If we can go to the next couple of slides, we can go through these fairly quickly, but these are construction pictures that we have actually begun the demolition of a portion of the treatment plant, that portion that was built originally in 1956, making that portion of the treatment plant nearly technology. It was highly effective and very advanced when it was first constructed, but currently it is not considered a good, effective way to especially remove nutrients from the effluent that leaves the treatment plant. And so we based on the discussions with the council and the administration, we've moved forward with some demolition of this older facility. And again, the age of the treatment plant was one of the primary conditions that we considered as we made the decisions and recommendations to the council to move forward with modifications at the treatment plant. The details I've given some of the, if we can go to the next slide, the details of the loan, I've given some of the details already. It includes $2 million of principal forgiveness. So the documents that you'll see tonight from Eric Hunter refer to a $75.8 million loan, and that's the amount that the loan is actually for. But it's important to recognize that they gave us a $2 million grant, essentially, in addition to that. Interest rate, as I indicated, is 0.5%. It's repayable over 20 years. The payments you'll see on the next slide, it's interest only for the first couple of years until the project's completed, and then principal and interest payments begin anticipated in the year 2027. I think one other component that I think is important for the council to note, as I mentioned previously in the work session, this is not a general revenue bond. This is a utility revenue bond, and it's paid by user fees, repaid by user fees that come from the wastewater bills that go to residents each month. So I think that's important. One of the questions that may come up from time to time, or you may have been asked from residents, is do we get a vote on this? The answer is no. State law allows the city council to approve revenue bonds from utilities. And so again, that's the action that we're requesting the council take tonight. So with that short presentation, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Hunter. He's on the Zoom meeting as well, and he's going to take the council through the specific documents. And then we'll just open it up. Once Eric is finished, we'll open it up for any questions that the council might have.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. So the item before you includes both a public hearing, so the usual public comment will be important to satisfy that state law and state purchaser requirement. And then the resolution itself establishes the parameters for the bonds in the amount of a maximum of $75.8 million in principal amount, and that is exclusive of the $2 million of principal forgiveness that was mentioned. The maximum interest rate is the 0.5% that was mentioned, and a maximum maturity of 24 years. That includes the 20-year amortization period once the principal payments start. The resolution authorizes execution of the main bond document relating to this transaction, which is the supplemental indenture that's going to be entered into to solidify and finalize the bond terms pursuant to the existing wastewater general indenture. And as mentioned, the wastewater indenture provides for payment of the bonds exclusively from the system revenues. The resolution also authorizes any other related bond documents. And it provides for publication of notice of bonds to be issued pursuant to the Bond Act in order to start a 30-day contest period. That's kind of the summary. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Mr. Decker, any questions? Okay, we'll open it up for public comment as mentioned. For public hearing. Here are the instructions on the screen for making a comment. Remember to press *9 to indicate that you would like to speak. I'll wait just a moment. All right, seeing no public comment, bring it back to council for any discussion. Mr. Harding?
I just wanted to thank the Public Works staff, everyone that's worked on this. And I think we should also thank the state for their very favorable loan parameters. This is not an easy thing to do, to address, but it is critical for our community that we address it. It's already been painful for everyone living in Provo, and will continue to be difficult, but I feel like this is the best way forward, and I commend all those who have worked on it so far.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. I do see a comment, a hand raised on the caller. So again, given our technical challenges with this online format, I'm going to allow for that comment. This is from caller 9995. You need to press *6 to unmute yourself. We seem to be having a difficulty allowing people to unmute themselves. And I cannot. unmute them, unfortunately.
Should we put the instructions back on the screen?
I don't know if staff have any idea why there might be this. So we've never had this problem before. Looks like that color is dropped. Okay. We'll bring it back then to council for further discussion. Any further comments, questions? All right, seeing none, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. We'll begin with Hoban. Mr. Hoban?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Mr. Sewell?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mr. Harding?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore?
Yes.
Okay, the voting is unanimous. Thank you so much, Mr. Hunter, for being with us, and Mr. Decker for all your work. We'll move on to an implied motion. This is item number 9 now on our agenda. This is an implied motion on an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 2.31 acres at 4100 North Canyon Road and 3.42 acres at 3956 North Canyon Road from residential agriculture to residential R110. This is in the North Timpview neighborhood, and this is presented by Aaron Ardmore.
Mr. Hanley, could I interject for a moment? Yeah. If people are calling in, I suspect this is an item that people will be calling in on, that if they're listening on the live streams, they're going to be 30 to 60 seconds behind. If you're on the live stream and you want to be calling in, or you're on a call and you're waiting for an opportunity to speak, mute the live streams and listen in with your phones so that you can respond in real time to the call for calling in, and be prepared to hit *9 if you want to speak, and then when you're called upon to hit *6. But I have a feeling that part of the problem is that people are listening on one and still have the phone on the other.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Strachan. That's helpful. All right, Mr. Ardmore.
Thank you. Council staff, if we could actually go to the most recent presentation I sent you. I think it's the next one over. There we go. So you can see here, so if you recall, this was continued at the last hearing with some discussion about what zone is appropriate and some of the layout. So I've produced this new slide to kind of give you the aerial background, as well as the main thing here is showing what is already zoned R110 and what is proposed to be changed from RA to R110. So you can see behind the layout, there's 2 sections that are highlighted in red. Those are the zone change sections. So the majority of the proposed development is already in the R110 zone. In addition to that, the other update is that the applicant has come back with this conceptual plan and included the property to the north to show how it would connect to the neighborhood. You still do see 3 cul-de-sacs, which of course planning would typically discourage. However, with the development in the area, a lot of these are established homes surrounding these vacant parcels. That this is really the best opportunity to connect through the neighborhood and access the majority of the lot through using cul-de-sacs. So those are the updates I have for you, and I'm here to answer any questions. I believe the applicant is on the line too, if you have questions for them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ardmore. Any questions for Mr. Ardmore before we open it up for public comment, or for, I suppose we can talk to the developer after the public comment period. All right, so let's invite public comment. So again, if you wish to make a comment, please press star 9. And then I see one caller whose number ends in 0114. Go ahead. If you press star 6, you will unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, I'm Kim Hurtado. My home borders the new development on 3950 North and 480 East. So I would be right across the street from that. Our neighborhood's already seeing the effects of the new construction of high density housing around us down on University Avenue. So I am for the already planned proposal of rezoning the agricultural land to R110 in North Timpview. If we went to high density, my children's elementary school will be Canyon Crest. My children will be walking on Canyon Road. It's already a lot of traffic, but that increased traffic and on-street parking on that busy road would be a hazard to our children walking to school. I also feel like North Timpview has a historic feel. It was the old orchards. In fact, we have 3 of the orchard, original orchard trees in our backyard, and that's part of the draw to that area. So again, like I said, I'm for the already planned proposal of rezoning to R110 and not to change it to high density. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't see a clock on that, which was fine. That was under 2 minutes, but I just want to make sure we have a clock for comments to be watching for that. We'll have 2 minutes apiece. So caller number 8784, go ahead. Looks like that. Oh, no, there we go. Press star 6 to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Yep, that worked.
Very good. Dan Clark. My house was in one of those red boxes off Timpview Drive, and I don't have any desire to put agricultural animals in my living room. That's been our joke for the 45 years that we've lived here. I represent the trustee of the trust that holds this property in question. And the developer worked with the owner, Bill Anderson, for years putting this plan together. Bill had a similar plan about 25 years ago, had a meeting with the neighborhood. It did not go well because he wanted higher density than R110. And anyway, I read your staff report. I read the development report, and they strongly recommend that this go forward. It's in keeping with the master plan. High density in this area is not in keeping with the master plan. My wife, who is the trustee of this property, has very, very strong feelings about high density and does not want that imposed, wants to move forward with the developer. They've been great to work with. They've earned our trust for about 1.5 years as the owner of the property was working with them. So the neighborhood is not interested in high density, and neither is the owner of the property. So I would hope that this discussion is short, that you pay attention to the staff report, that you pay attention to the development agency's report, and move forward and find a better use of our time. Thank you. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate your service to our community. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Caller 9005, go ahead. Press star 6.
Hi.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I'm trying to lower your hand and I just muted you by mistake. So press star 6 again.
Okay, that was funny. I thought that I had done something wrong. Okay, so this is Angela Maurik. I'm just calling in. I just had a couple points for the council. I agree with everything that the last caller said. So instead of reiterating what he said, I'm just going to say a couple points. I'm just concerned that there has even been a conversation about high density along Canyon Road. being discussed. And I'd just like to remind the council that back on February 4th, the residents of the city were basically told over the pulpit, so to speak, that they would finally get a neighborhood plan for this North Timpview area. Also, there's been a lot of discussion about updating the city's master plan or general plan, and I'm hoping that this update will be forward-thinking and much needed Venn diagram for the city's future needs, commutatively, and not just one trending current topic, which is high density. There's so many topics that are pertinent to the city. A well-balanced city needs a healthy mix of things, and high density doesn't work on this bench. There's lots of it around us. There's lots of senior housing and mixed housing already. But one thing I'd like to point out that's happening, I'd like to correct some misinformed thinking going around the area that everybody in Edgemont is rich who lives up here. And it's common knowledge for those of us who live in Edgemont that the corridor along Canyon Road is the poor area. And because there are expensive homes on the hill and in the river bottoms does not mean that everyone up here is rich. Let me tell you what's happening in this area. By creating more high density, which is all over the river bottoms, we have plenty of it already, but it doesn't mean high density does not equal affordability. And the apartments in this condo right now in this area are so pricey that people, if they're going to sell their homes in the Edgemont area, can't afford to live here anymore. So yeah, high density does not equal affordability. And I'd like you to keep that in mind. And it's kind of foolhardy to think it does. So theory and current ideology does not necessarily equal reality. For those of us living here, we worry about that conversation. And I'd just like the council to take a step back. And like the last caller said, let's go forward with the R110 plan, which is in current harmony with the master plan. Get a good neighborhood plan in place. And that's just what I'd like to say.
Thank you so much. The clock didn't ding when the 2 minutes were up, so you didn't hear it. But thank you.
I apologize. Thank you.
No problem. All right, we'll go to caller 3380. 3380. Go ahead. Press *6 to unmute. Go ahead.
Hello. Okay, just to let you know, I pushed *6 3 times before it went through, so there's definitely an issue going on here. My name is Araceli Naktuvai, and I am from the North Timpview neighborhood, and I do support the developer's plan for R110 zoning. And I agree with the words that all of my neighbors have said, Kim Hurtado, Dan Clark. This should not even be brought up about a high density housing over here. It'd be dangerous for our children. I have 5 children under the age of 13, and this would directly affect our family and their safety. So I would hope that this council hears the words of the residents of this neighborhood, and please do not even consider the high density housing that has been brought up. Please continue with the plan for the R110 that we have supported, because this is our neighborhood, this is our home. And I personally didn't buy my house here to live in a high density area. So please respect the residents that live in this area that call this place home. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other callers, if you wish to speak? Yes, caller 2790. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Lucy Butler calling. I'm from the North Canyon neighborhood, and I also am in favor of the R110 zoning. Many of the others who have called have young children. My young children have been raised in this area. We sought out this neighborhood over 30 years ago as a place to raise our children. And now my husband and I find ourselves in the senior class. And we love living in our neighborhood. We sought it out because along Timpview Drive and Canyon Road, there are places to walk and to be with our neighbors and to socialize. And we really feel strongly about preserving the nature of a community where there is not a lot of traffic at times, and that we can walk and be out and enjoy socializing with our neighborhood. So I really appreciate the opportunity to call in and express my feedback. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to caller 7302. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sandra, and I also live in the North Timpview neighborhood. And we just moved here 2 years ago for the exact reasons that all my neighbors had described. So we actually lived for 14 years in South Provo. We loved our neighborhood, but the zoning was changed for small lot single family dwellings. Once that zoning was changed, a bunch of high density housing came in after. So if you go down to that area, Slate Canyon right now, you'll see just hundreds of units of townhomes and condominiums, which was the result of changing the zoning. We moved here because we prefer the safety of knowing your neighbors and knowing who is driving by on your street, not the 300 or 400 people that live above you, but the people that you've grown up with, you know, care about your children, care about the well-being of your children, and are invested in the community feel. And so we spent 8 years searching for this neighborhood, and we're lucky to get in here at some point to be here, and we couldn't be more happy. So we ask you to please preserve this the R110 feel of this neighborhood. Or, I mean, for a long time, we actually looked at moving elsewhere because we couldn't find what we were looking for in Provo. Both of us grew up here. We wanted to stay here. And we just plead with you to please keep it R110 so that other people who grew up here can have the same ability to live in a wonderful neighborhood like this, where their kids are safe, know their neighbors, are supported, and will give back to the community for years and years, and possibly even generations, as a lot of these houses sell to children. And that is my comment. Thank you for listening.
State your complete name. I'm sorry, we didn't hear a last name.
Sorry, it's Sandra Chamberlain.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in. Any other?
Okay, thank you.
Any other callers who wish to speak? Press *9. Okay, caller 9104, go ahead. Press *6 to unmute. 9104. Caller 9104, last chance. I mean, I can try again later, but if you hear me, press *6. There you go. Still muted for some reason. Okay. Well, caller 9106, we're not able to hear you. I don't know what the problem is. If you have pressed *6, you should be unmuted.
The number is 9104. There you go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Hanley, is that *6 a toggle? So if they press it again, would that reverse? Yes. Yeah, okay.
So that's part of the problem, that people are pushing it back and forth?
Yeah, they need to push it once and then just let it take effect.
So I actually can't see the last four numbers anymore. 9104.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't know what to do. I can't. We'll come back to this caller. We'll go to the next one, 1481. Go ahead. 1481. You're on. Hello? You're not muted. Oops, now you are. No, now you're unmuted.
It's possible they're still muted on their own phone though.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had to do that 3 times as well. Anyway, my name is Kirk Tyler. I'm a resident in the North Timpview neighborhood area, and I'm just calling in favor of what the previous callers have all called in about as well. I've raised my family here. My wife and I are empty nesters, and we came to this area because she grew up in the area, and we'd like to see it stay the same. And we're in favor of the R110 as the developer has submitted. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to caller 7790. Yes, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I need to state my name, is that right?
Yes, please. And your town of residence.
Yeah, my name is Brian Morrow, and my town of residence is Provo.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Yeah, thank you for allowing us to give some input in here. I've been a resident of Provo since 1987, and I've lived in 2 blocks of where we live right now during that time period. We live directly across the street from the property that is being in question, and we've just invested a lot of time and a lot of money into these neighborhoods. When we moved onto this street, there were quite a few homes that were in really poor condition. In fact, one of them, the roof had collapsed. And so for the last 2 decades, we've spent time, we've bought some of these places and have removed the houses and built new homes on them. Actually 5 on our street between us and some other family members. And when we did this, we always anticipated that this would be an R110 zone. In fact, this has come before the council. I think this is the 4th time for these vacant properties here. And every time the neighborhood has spoken up in support in terms of keeping it as an R110 neighborhood. So I think there's quite a bit of precedence in this area that's been set by people who've lived in this area for a long time. And so by not keeping it, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's your 2-minute warning or your clock.
Okay. I'm just totally in favor of leaving it as R110. There's been a lot of precedence by 3 different councils to keep it as an R110. It's been tried to, the density has been tried to be increased in the past several times. And in all those cases, the neighborhood has objected to that, and the city council had agreed and set this precedence. So I think I just don't think that it does not need to be done. We are already a neighborhood that has a lot of different socioeconomic levels within our neighborhood. And I think that already works. And so I think that we should keep it that way. So I'm totally in favor of the developer of keeping it as R110.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, everybody, try to keep to your 2 minutes. Thank you. Caller 5734, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Allie Conger, and I live in the North Timpview neighborhood. And I am in favor of leaving the development to be proposed, one that Dudley has proposed, to leave it as a R110 zone. There's a lot of reasons why I think it's best to leave it the way that the plan entails. And there are three the most important reasons that I want to tell you about. First of all, I don't think that Canyon Road is equipped to handle the increased traffic and parking, and the congestion and the safety issues that will be added to this neighborhood will be a safety problem and issues for everyone. There already are lots of units and homes being built in North Canyon Road, which will increase the traffic, and those are already underway. The infrastructure just isn't here to handle it, and the park that's coming just south of us will also increase the amount of parking and people on the road, and it would be astronomically expensive for the city to be able to make Canyon Road be able to be conducive to all of the traffic and all of the growth. I do realize that growth is important and it'll help bring money and revenue to our city, and so we're in favor of the neighborhood being developed, and Dudley's idea will bring long-term revenue to and families that will bring money to the city through employment and taxes and all the costs that go along with raising a family and staying in the city long term. I don't think there's any reason to change the zoning. We have a lot of diversity and different types of economic availability for large homes, small homes, old homes, new homes. So and like a caller said earlier, just because it's high density doesn't mean it's going to be affordable. And there are a lot of apartments and condos just bordering our neighborhood. Okay, I just want the geographical area with the mountains on the east and the cliff on the west really make it limited to what we can do for infrastructure without taking people's property. And so I think you should really steer away from high density and stick with R110.
All right, thank you. Any other callers? Caller 7793. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Bonnie Morrow, North Timpview Neighborhood Chair. And I'd like to first point out for all those listening and council that our neighborhood is pretty deceptive. We actually start at Edgemont Elementary right across the street, and we go all the way up through the canyon, and we have Canyon Road and all the little roads on the right-hand side or left-hand if you're going up or down Canyon Road. And then we also have Timpview Drive all the way down the length of that. And as you start really looking at those homes across the street from Edgemont Elementary and make your way down Canyon Road or Timpview Drive, you will see homes that are 800 square feet, 1,200 square feet. Actually, directly across from this property is a tiny home that the senior finally passed away. We loved her dearly. We worked on her garage for her. She finally did pass away happily, and that home was sold and a new family has moved in, and it is a tiny little home. And you look all along Canyon Road, and in the middle, in between Canyon Road and North Timpview, you will see many beautiful little well cared for homes that are sprinkled all through. And then the square footage goes up to 2,200, 2,400, 3,000 square feet. There are many, many homes at 3,000 square feet. And then they started sprinkling a little bit bigger than that as the homes were being torn down and trying to recoup the costs on those lots. Also, I'd like to point out that at 3 Fountains, which is all condos, there are for sale signs currently right now posted outside their property where they are trying to sell their condos out there. And there's been signs out there all summer where they've been trying to sell the condos for sale. Also, I'd like to point out that we have homeowners that are from newlywoods all the way to seniors. We have 80-year-olds. My parents are in their 80s. They're on an R110 lot. They have no plans of moving because they love their yard and their garden, and they love the neighborhood, and they love the little children coming by and talking to them. They love everything about our neighborhood. And there are many, many seniors in our neighborhood, as well as many, many newlywoods. The other thing that is kind of really crazy about this whole thing is, for the first time in the history of North Timpview, we have a property owner, a developer, and the residents all excited about this plan. And the stars and the moon have aligned, because usually I'm coming before you with many problems throughout the years, but I'm very happy to report to you right now that the stars have aligned. Everybody on our side of the fence is happy. The residents, the developer, and the seller, they all want to see this R110 go forward. And we respectfully ask the council to please move forward with an R110. And we are just so happy to embrace these new homes with the big yards, especially with COVID. Everyone wants yards now, big yards, and it will be a blessing for North Timpview.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other callers? Caller 7233. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Megumi Matsuzawa. I live in the property neighborhood for over 20 years, and I am in favor of R110 and against with the high density area change. We just love this neighborhood, and everyone said beautifully, but I think we have enough high density in our area already, that we don't need that, and our neighborhood is really established and with a lot of different demographics, ages, and it's really safe and comfortable neighborhood. And I would like the city to keep it with R110. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller 4559, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Chris Papperg. I live about 2 blocks from the proposed area. I'm in favor of the R110 designation. We've lived in the area for about 25 years, have raised our kids here. But I actually work in Northern California, currently not commuting, but have before. I've seen high development, high density areas be put in. That's about the fastest way to destroy a sense of community, but to pack in bodies. And I would ask that that's not be done in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller, let's see. Isn't that the number I just? Yeah. Okay. Any other callers? Yes, caller 3188, go ahead. Go ahead. Oops, you were unmuted for a second. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is that working now?
Yes.
So just echoing the same thing, I'm actually born and raised in the Provo, Edgemont, North Timpview area, and would love to see it stay the same. I do think we are getting a lot of higher density housing as well, and it's not always cheaper. In fact, a place just down the road that's a higher density is actually $500,000. So I would love to see this area stay the way it has. I mean, it's had growth. It's still growing some, but I'd love to see it stay kind of the community feel that it is. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Caller I can't see the number.
472.
2472, go ahead.
Yes, hi, this is Cindy Reed, and I live right where 3950, which gets a lot of traffic from the north area of Timpview, hits 39, hits Canyon Road. So I'm right on that tee off right there. And I cannot even imagine the amount of traffic that would come down Canyon Road. I've lived with it for years, and it's just what we live with because we bought the house on Canyon Road. But I can't even imagine the amount of and the quantity of traffic that would be down this road. And as an earlier caller said, we're in a narrow channel here. You've got a drop off to the west and you've got a hill to the east. And so the only roads here are Canyon Road, and then you've got Timpview Drive, and then you've got dropping down to University Avenue. So if you push too much more traffic down this road, then it's going to be extremely oppressive and it already has residences all up and down Canyon Road. You can't change that fact that it has those residences. So as a resident, I would actually want to state that there should be a full vehicle and traffic analysis for the number of units that would be in some high density housing and the number of vehicles that would put out on the road. Because you consider that even if it's a newlywed couple, they have 2 cars usually, because he goes to work and she has to drive, and go to work, or she has to take the kids, or she goes to work and he has to take the kids. So even in a high density housing, people will have at least 1 car and 2 cars. And I think there would have to be an entire study of the impact of that on 3950 and also Canyon Road before anything should be thought in that direction of high density housing. And I've been in Provo since 1984, and I've been through the different things where Bonnie was talking about how the stars were aligning, because I was one of those who was like, no, you can't do that. You can't build that. So we do have a history here of where the neighborhood and the seller and the builder did not see eye to eye. So as she stated, I want to reemphasize the fact that everybody is agreeing to the Dudley plan, and the Dudley has spent all of this money to develop this plan and have it ready to go. It's just insane, in my opinion, that for some reason the city council is going to come and throw us all on our heads and say the plan won't work. That just seems crazy to me, that for some reason the city council can negate the cooperation of the neighborhood and the seller of the property and the engineer and developer of the property. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other callers? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for discussion. Mr. Fillmore, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
No longer.
No longer.
Yes, I kind of feel I listed all these callers, but maybe we kind of sounded a false alarm a couple of weeks ago. The matter that came before the council was approval of this rezone to R110. Had the planning commission approval, and a couple of councilors suggested it might be worth taking a look at the possibility the developer might want to reconsider and look at a higher medium density project. In the interim, he's indicated, I think that most of us know, that he has absolutely no interest in that, and won't even pursue anything on the ground unless he can pursue the plan that he thought had already been green lighted by the city administration and the planning commission. But my own feeling is this is a very good project. It's got total neighborhood support. I mean, this is, of course, my district, but I've never received anywhere close to this many emails on any matter before the council. My guess right now is I'm looking maybe 7 to 80 email comments from people in my district. It's been 100% in favor of the current proposal, and a lot of anxiety about the possibility of high density housing. This project is a good fit for this place. It's not a good fit for high density. You've got a 2-lane road, you've got no mass transit. You've got other higher density projects down on University, just essentially a block away. You're very close to an elementary school. I mean, for all kinds of reasons that you've heard tonight, this project is now proposed by Mr. Dudley is a very nice fit for this community. And I would formally move that the council approve the zone change request.
I'll second that motion.
This has an implied motion, so we don't need to make a motion.
I'll withdraw.
Ms. Ellsworth.
Yes, I appreciate Mr. Fillmore's remarks, and I agree. I'm not sure where the idea of high density came from, but it wasn't. I am interested in diverse housing types throughout Provo. I don't think it's healthy and sustainable for the entire city to not have inclusive and diverse housing types. So I would be interested in more innovation and a little broader thinking, a little more open mind when it comes to housing projects in this area. But I understand that the neighbors have very specific desires. I just hope that folks wouldn't see people who live in low, medium, or high density housing as a threat. They're important individuals in our city, and they're certainly not unsafe just because they live in a different type of housing. And I think there's different kinds of affordable or attainable or entry-level housing solutions that we could consider in our city. That might be accessory dwelling unit overlays. That might be R18 or R16. So I really, really, really hope that we won't continue to do what we've always done, but that we will genuinely look for innovation and diversity in housing types. And that's all I wanted to say.
Any other comments from the council, Mr. Poole?
Well, I love to see it when the stars align. I think that phrase was used earlier, where you've got a property owner, developer, and the neighborhood that are just virtually 100% in lockstep in their desire to move ahead, where you've got staff support and you've got unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission. So I fully support this and hope that we can move ahead quickly with it.
Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Chair. One thing that I'm disappointed a little bit in this conversation is, and I think pretty much everyone's expressed it so far, is like where the impression of high density came from. And I mean, I think perhaps different people have different definitions of high density, but I'm not. I mean, unless you're thinking that an R18 is high density, at least that's not my definition of high density. And so a lot of the comments have been fairly, I don't know, fear-based about, raising the alarm of high density. And I'm just curious, like, what people thought that meant. Another thing to look at is that these zones kind of set an upper limit of the intensity of development, and so if this area were to be zoned R18 and the developer wants to put in 10,000 square foot lots, there's nothing that stops them. So it's not like the council is even if we were to zone this R18, that's not forcing the developer to do anything. It just broadens what is allowed. Earlier this year, sometimes the years run together, but I believe earlier this year we approved a PD zone for a little bit further down on this road. I had it open earlier. I forget what the development is called, but it had a mixture of houses. They were all single family housing, but there was some connection on some of the units. I think Georgetown Development is the developer on that. And last time I went by, it's under construction, but not yet complete. And I see that all but 2 of the units have already been sold. And so I think there was some reference to those units as not necessarily affordable, which probably not, but probably more affordable than what they would be if they were all detached. But I hope that the community can see projects like that and realize that it's not in conflict with the neighborhood. It can integrate nicely and get that housing type diversity. We're not talking about demographic diversity. I think what is discussed is just housing type diversity, and the benefits that can bring to our neighborhoods. I can't remember. I can't remember who came up with this idea, but I think the question was asked. What if the council zoned it R110A, and so it would have an accessory dwelling unit overlay that would allow more flexibility in use. And I think I reached out to Mr. Jones to ask about procedurally, is that an option open to the council at this point, or is that something that would have to be returned to the Planning Commission for review? And I believe he was going to look into that. So I don't know if Mr. Jones can respond to that question.
I don't know if Mr. McGinn is on the call. I did not get a chance to speak to him. I did look around. I did look at the code, and I looked at and had a conversation with the other attorneys in the office. By way of context, the city has often taken has I think pretty consistently taken the position in the past that if something comes to the Planning Commission and then to the council, and the council wants to do something different than what the Planning Commission actually considered, that they can if what they are changing to is more restrictive than what the Planning Commission considered, but that they cannot if it's less restrictive. And it seems it seems to me that putting on the A overlay and opening up a permitted use that would not otherwise be allowed is less restrictive rather than more restrictive. So it seems to me that proposal would need to go back to the Planning Commission before the council could act on it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. I don't know if Mr. Pepperoni, I haven't seen Mr. McGinn here, but anyways, if I'd be interested if there's other thoughts on that, but that was generally my understanding, what Mr. Jones just explained. So anyway, those are my thoughts on this. I don't feel like I can, and Mr. Pepperoni, I kind of see, if you'd like to say something, please feel free.
Just that what Mr. Jones just expressed is consistent with previous discussions we've had on this exact issue.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I would concur with his opinion.
Thank you. So with that, I don't feel at this time I can vote for the implied motion. I'd be interested in perhaps having, not a discussion about high density, but a discussion about whether an A overlay is appropriate for this area. I would love to hear the neighborhood's thoughts on an A overlay. And again, this does not force anyone to have an accessory dwelling unit. It just opens up that option. So that would be my preference, and I don't feel like I can vote for the implied motion at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harding. Any other comments from the council? Okay, if not, then I will call for a vote on the implied motion, and I'll begin with Mr. Sewell.
Yes.
Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mr. Harding.
No.
Ms. Ellsworth.
No.
Mr. Gilmore.
Yes.
Mr. Hoban.
Yes.
So that was 5-2 in favor, with Mr. Harding and Ms. Ellsworth opposed. All right. Thank you all, and now move on to item number 10, which is an implied motion on an ordinance amending Provo City Code related to condominiums. This has citywide application with Robert Mills, planning supervisor, as our presenter.
Thank you very much, Council. I think that John has the language for this up, and oh, perfect. This is a presentation that I did to the city, to the Planning Commission, but basically a few years ago, in an effort to improve the overall development process, the City Council made a change to the way that we do subdivision and approving subdivisions. In that there is a specific set of requirements, and rather than having those things go to the Planning Commission for approval, that as long as the subdivision through the process of review in the CRC committee meets all of the requirements, that those can be approved administratively. In looking a little deeper into some of the other things that we do that are related to subdivision, we also process condominium plats, and our current language in the code relating to condominiums is actually kind of the former process where applicants have to go to Planning Commission for approval. Actually makes it a little bit more cumbersome other than is required by state law. So we just wanted to kind of update this section of our code, streamline it for development purposes, and instead of having those condominium plats approved by the Planning Commission, to go through the same process as we do with final subdivision, and just create a little bit more streamlining. We do have the language suggested for you. The Planning Commission reviewed this, felt like it was a really positive move. Take away some of those administrative things that they've been doing so they can focus more on planning efforts. And one of the Planning Commission members actually mentioned that it actually even helps housing in a way, because it streamlines the process for condominium conversion of apartments to actually units that can be sold and held privately. So they all voted in favor of this, and just wanted to bring this to you folks, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Any questions for Mr. Mills? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address this issue? I'll give it a few moments to allow callers to indicate that they would like to speak. You want to press *9. Okay, we'll bring it back to council for any discussion. Okay, this is the first time this item has been heard by the council. Does any council member desire to consider this item again at the next council meeting? All right, seeing no request for that, then I will call for a vote on the implied motion. We'll begin with Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mr. Harding?
Yes.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore?
Yes.
Mr. Hoban?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Voting is unanimous.
Thank you, Council.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Mills. We'll turn to item number 11, which is an ordinance, an implied motion on an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 0.5 acres of real property generally located at 2022 West Center Street from residential agricultural to general commercial. And this is in the Fort Utah neighborhood. Brandon Larson, city planner, will present.
Okay, thank you, Council. This is I feel like a pretty straightforward application. It's a half-acre parcel on at the intersection of Center Street and Geneva Road. I'm having a hard time advancing my screen here, but anyway, so there we go. So we've got a proposal that again is on Geneva and Center Street, proposing proposing to change the zoning on a half-acre parcel. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, or the right-hand side of the screen, on either one really, you can see the commercial zoning that surrounds the subject parcel. The subject parcel, again, in that intersection, is surrounded by the CG zone on the west and south, and on the east, you've got shopping center and neighborhood community zoning. So the applicant has not submitted a concept plan. He just generally wants to, as he put this forward to the planning commission, he just noted that he'd like to get this property rezoned and then kind of see what kind of offers he gets from potential suitors. So feel like this proposal is in harmony with the policies of the neighborhood plan. It's also in harmony with being advanced to the next couple of screens here. There we go. And then this is kind of an aerial photo of the property, but could we advance one more? Southwest area future land use plan, up in you can't see my cursor, but up in the Fort Utah area, you can see a village center commercial mixed use, large pink shape there. That's the future land use calls for commercial on this corner. General planning calls for commercial. Everything lines up and says, rather than this being residential agricultural, it should be commercial. And so staff feels like the proposed amendment is again in harmony with this future land use map and the general plan. And if you have any other questions, I'm certainly willing to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Any questions? Mr. Larson? Okay, we'll see if there are any comments from the public. Give it a moment.
Right.
All right, we'll bring it back to council. Any discussion of this item, Mr. Shipley?
Yeah, just a quick comment. This is a place that I drive by quite often. Right now, it's basically an empty parking lot. It wouldn't be a location that residential could be. It's not a spot that agricultural land could be used on. And I was part of the neighborhood meeting where they presented this, and the neighborhood's fully supportive. So I would support, kind of taking this legacy parcel and making it consistent with the block.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shipley. Any other comments or discussion from the council? This is the first time this item has been heard by the council. So if does any council member desire to consider this item again in the next council meeting? All right, without such a request, then I will call for a vote on the implied motion. I will begin, and I vote yes. Mr. Harding?
Yes.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan? Mr. Hoban?
Yes.
Mr. Sewell?
Yes.
And Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
Okay, that voting was unanimous. We'll turn to item number 12, an implied motion on an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding swimming pool fencing and covering. This has citywide application. This is also presented by Aaron Ardmore. Go ahead, Mr. Ardmore.
Thank you. So there's just one slide on this, if you can go to that, John. It's just a basic deleting the existing code that limited the protection for a swimming pool to a 6-foot fence. The new paragraph there matches the international code. So this allows us to move forward as the building code, international building code changes. Our swimming pool section will change with it as it references that. At this time, it gives it more options. There's different barriers that people can do now and still meet building code. So it's just a simple change to meet international building code, and I have Plan Commission recommended approval. So if you have any questions for me, just let me know.
Thank you. Any comment from the public on this item? Give it a few moments. Okay, we'll bring it back to the council for any discussion from the council. This does not appear to be generating controversy, Mr. Ardmore. Okay, this is the first time this has been heard by the council. Does any council member desire to consider this item again? Oh, I see a comment from Ms. Ellsworth. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious if it should be more restrictive. I used to live in Arizona, and there's swimming pools all over down there, and there's a lot of deaths, a lot of accidents. And I'm just curious if this is above and beyond the minimum.
Mr. Ard.
Question. Is that a question for me? Okay. I would reply to that by saying we're just following along with the international code on this, with our building code for pools and hot tubs. They know better than I do, so we're just following along what they regulate.
I appreciate that. I'd be interested in, if the rest of the council is, and just doing a little more homework and looking at what other cities have done. In some cities in Arizona, it's required that you have a fence around the entire perimeter of your pool. And, I think part of that's referenced in this ordinance, or you have a certain kind of lock on your door. So if there are better, safer restrictions that would keep people from having accidents with swimming pools, I would be interested in that.
Is that a formal request for to continue this item again at our next meeting?
It's not a formal request to continue. It's a request that we do more homework, because I think this is good. Maybe there's better.
Okay. Mr. Harding?
I was just curious. I think a lot of what you just suggested, and I guess I haven't done the homework, but I believe, it being fully enclosed and all of that is part of those international standards.
Yeah, there's different kinds of enclosures. There's ones that are around your yard. There's ones that are around the pool. In some cities, it's permitted to, even if you have a fence around your backyard, if there's not one around the pool, then your back door going out to the pool has to have 2 locks on it, one up and one down, so that a little kid couldn't get out there accidentally and toddle around. So there's more restrictive regulations in other cities that it would not suffice just to have a fenced backyard. You would also have to have a fenced pool or a certain kind of backdoor lock.
Mr. Sewell?
Since the question has been raised, I'm just wondering how difficult it would be to pull up a description of what the international standard says about this. I don't know where to look for it, but.
While you're looking, Mr. Ardmore, Mr. Hoban has a question as well.
Would pools that are already in place be grandfathered in, or would they have to be brought up to code?
Those would be grandfathered.
Thank you.
So let me go back to my initial question, because if we're going to if we want to wait one more meeting, we don't need to settle this issue right now. So let me just ask if there's any request from any council member to revisit this item again at the next meeting. So no request to see this item at our next meeting. But we are waiting for more information. I'm unclear what's going on here. Sorry, Mr. Sewell was wondering if we can get the international code.
Yeah, I'm looking through it right now to try to find what measures they allow. It may take more time than what you want to spend on it right now.
Mr. Sewell?
I'm comfortable moving ahead. We don't have really very many swimming pools here, and I'm assuming the international standard is based on, includes areas that have a lot of swimming pools and a lot of experience with the safety issues. But if we were to find that we didn't think that their restrictions were sufficient, I'd be happy to support bringing it back. But at the moment, I'm willing to assume that they are.
It's like the IBC where you have to pay. It's always really hard to access those codes.
Okay. Well, if there is no formal request, then I will call for a vote on the implied motion unless there's more discussion. All right, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. I'll begin with you, Mr. Hoban, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I guess I'm just feeling like let's continue it. I mean, nobody can really say what the international standards are. And so I'm thinking, let's all take a little bit of time, do our homework, and then vote after we've done a little research. I hate to vote on something that none of us are really educated on or know what we're voting on. So if nobody else would like to continue it, I will, just so we can all do a little more research on it.
All right.
Or I'll request that it be continued.
Okay, thank you. I was looking for that language. Yeah. Mr. Fillmore, go ahead.
I just would agree with Counselor Hoban. I don't think there's any rush on this particular matter. We might as well find out what the international standards are.
Okay. All right, then we will continue this item to our next meeting, and we will look for more information on what's in the international code and any potential discrepancies that there might be with other cities, I guess, is what I heard from the discussion.
I'll come prepared with that at the next meeting. I'll talk to our building inspectors and get a copy of that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ardmore, and thanks for your patience and your service as always. Okay, we will move on then to item number 13. We're not done with you yet, Mr. Ardmore. This is an ordinance amending, as again, another implied motion on an ordinance amending the low density residential LDR and very low density residential VLDR zones. This is a citywide application. And again, Mr. Ardmore is our presenter.
Thank you. So this amendment is affecting two zones, the LDR and the VLDR, but with similar amendments to them. So as staff has been going through and adopting LDR zones and having those projects developed, we haven't been really getting what was fully desired in some areas. We found that more rooftops were coming into these developments that weren't really fitting with the character of the adjacent single-family residential neighborhoods. So one of the ways we're addressing that is reducing the maximum density from 15 units to 12 units. The projects that we've had come through, I don't think any of them have gotten to that 15. So bringing it down to 12 just makes sense to provide more opportunities for open space and to make a more livable community. Then another part of that is the bulking of the buildings. We're suggesting bringing that down from 8 to 6 as far as attached townhomes in a row, which would also help to kind of make that fit in with the residential neighborhood. It's a less width on a building and makes it more similar to what maybe an adjacent single family dwelling is. And then the third one in the LDR zone is for some of those infill sites where maybe a single family detached home still makes sense in kind of a mixed use project with the LDR zoning. We wanted to provide more opportunity for that. So we are proposing reducing that square footage minimum from 5,000 to 4,000 just for single family homes. And then similar changes in the very low density residential zone. It's a new zone, but we figured what makes sense in one would make sense in the other. So we're reducing attached dwellings from 7 to 6. And then again, that single family detached minimum square footage for the lot from 5,000 to 4,000. Staff is trying to make these zones work for what the purpose and objectives are stated as. The Planning Commission thought that this was a good idea and recommended approval to you. I'm here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ardmore before we open it up for public comment? All right, we'll open it up then to the public. Anyone who wishes to speak, you'll want to press *9. Callers may be waiting for the next item. Okay, we'll bring it back to the council then for any council discussion. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Chair. So I like most of what is being proposed here. I'm a little unsure about the proposal to reduce the single-family lot size from 5,000 to 4,000 for very low-density residential. The idea behind that was to pretty closely match the density of an R16, but allow more flexibility in housing types. And so I think it makes a lot of sense for the LDR, which is a slightly more intense use, but for a VLDR, I'm a little uncomfortable moving below the rough square footage of the R16. So I'm curious if staff thought about that, and if you could help me understand the rationale on why, again, because of the differences between LDR and VLDR, why we would move both of them down to 4,000.
Yeah, thank you. So the bringing it down to 4,000 doesn't necessarily, like you spoke in an earlier item, doesn't necessarily restrict a developer from doing a bigger lot, but really allows on a lot of these pioneer neighborhoods, you've got some pretty deep lots, but not much acreage because they're narrow. So to get more infill in those types of developments, we thought bringing it down to 4,000 still provides a good size for a single family home, still plenty of building space, and allows the setbacks to still occur without variances. So staff thought, looking around the map and looking around different proposals that have come in, that would be a fair amendment.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the council? I do see a hand up from attendees on the phone. I don't know if this is for this item. If it's for the next item, maybe you can lower your, I don't know how they will. Anyway, I guess I'll just go ahead and allow for a public comment from caller 2472. Press *6 to speak. Go ahead.
All right. Hi, this is Cindy Reed. I was on for the earlier call and I just kept listening out of common city interest. And I just found it a little, I just want to make the comment about when you take a lower level of required space for lots, any developer is going to go for the lower and make more money. So and the comment was made during the Canyon Road building also that, well, just because we zone it lower, the builder can still do the larger. But any builder is going to evaluate and maximize what they can accomplish in a smaller amount of land. So you can say that the builder won't stay in that, but most builders are going to go for the money. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. All right, we'll bring it back then for any further conversation from the council. Mr. Sewell.
Mr. Harding's comment kind of got me thinking, and I tend to have the same concern. It does seem like we're aiming for a little different density between those two zones, and so I kind of lean toward not lowering the minimum lot size on the VLDR. One other comment related to that is I think we've had some real good experience with the LDR, and I think that staff has brought back some really good suggestions to make it more useful based on that experience. But we don't really have experience or much experience with the VLDR zone yet. And so I would lean toward waiting on that to see if we really think that particular aspect of the change is warranted.
Mrs. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I think it's a good proposal. I like where this is going, and I can support all of it. I think it's smart to reduce the numbers of townhomes in a row, because that would change the massing overall and just make it a little bit more compatible instead of having a big long row of townhomes, it would be in shorter blocks. And then I'm fine with the smaller lot size. I watched a planning commission meeting from a few months ago or weeks ago where the developer wasn't a developer. They just had a bigger lot and they wanted to subdivide it. And in order to meet the minimum lot size, they were creating some really strange jogs in their property line. And it was just totally infeasible that anyone would want a property line like that. So by allowing a smaller lot size, they wouldn't have to make those strange jogs in their property to subdivide a bigger lot and bring in a smaller lot with one home. And I think that's what this is trying to facilitate is just smarter infill. So I'm supportive.
Mr. Harding.
Thank you. I believe that the council has looked at that item that Ms. Ellsworth just referred to, and I think I actually think it's the next item on our agenda, and I think we continued it because it was so odd shaped, and so I think this is staff coming back with a proposed solution, and so I share almost everything that Ms. Ellsworth just said, and I share that same position on almost all of it. Other than I do think that there should be a difference between the VLDR and LDR. I think there's, if we're just going to kind of mesh them together, why have a separate zone? I think it is supposed to serve a separate purpose, and at some point there should be a line that shouldn't be crossed where a lot can be subdivided. At some point, the acreage is too small and shouldn't be subdivided. And I think it's reasonable that would be different for an LDR than a VLDR. So I agree with pretty much everything Ms. Ellsworth said, other than, I think there should be a line somewhere. And so, I think we're still discussing it, and I don't want to jump the gun too early, but I think this is a first hearing. I think I would like staff to maybe go back and take a look at this and see if they'd be open to changing that recommendation from 400 or from 4,000 to 5,000 just for the VLDR. I believe the next item, and I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I think the next item, they're asking for a VLDR, but perhaps an LDR would be appropriate for that would allow them to subdivide that lot into two with a 4,000, because it's LDR rather than VLDR. But in general, I think we created that VLDR zone for a reason, because there are places where the LDR doesn't fit, and that still gives us more housing flexibility. So I like having the two tools that have separate levels of restriction on it.
All right, so Mr. Harding's requesting then for this item to be considered at the next council meeting. Is there any further discussion of this item that would be helpful to the staff, or is there anything the staff would like more to understand more about our concerns?
I think I think the staff are a little bit confused. What David was referencing was that subdivision and rezone in the Franklin neighborhood, which is your next item. When it came before you the first time a couple months ago with those weird lot lines, council directed us to find a way to make it work, because the subdivision made sense, but the lot restrictions were making it complicated. And I feel this would do that. But now if we don't want that, I think staff just needs to be informed on which direction we want to go.
Mr. Harding.
Thank you. I apologize if I was confusing. Can you help remind me? I think it was was it 3 weeks ago? It may have been before, but the last time we heard this and we continued it, was it proposed as a VLDR or was it proposed as an LDR at that point?
It was never, this application's actually never come to you before. It was this Brandon Larson staff. There was an associated text amendment in the middle of August that came before you. And the concept plan for this upcoming item was looked at pretty closely. And while we looked at that, while we looked at the kind of concept plan that helped facilitate the discussion of the text amendment that was related to lot depth in the LDR and the VLDR zone, it seemed like there was some support for looking at kind of, I don't want to put words in the council's mouth, but some support for trying to facilitate maybe a little bit smarter configuration, even to the point of maybe reducing even considering reducing the area minimum for that zone. That was kind of our understanding.
Okay, and thank you for clarifying that for me. I remember that we had seen that lot before, but it makes sense that it was just as an example for that text amendment request. So to answer the question earlier, I think one way to move forward with this would be to reduce the minimum lot size for single family detached in the LDR from 5,000 to 4,000, to leave it at 5,000 for VLDR, with the understanding that the difference between VLDR and LDR is just less density. And so at least I think it makes sense to have that differentiated there. And then for that lot in Franklin neighborhood that we did indicate that we think that that's reasonable and should move ahead. If the applicant was willing, or I guess if the council just wanted to, we could rezone it as LDR, and then it would accommodate what they want to accomplish. But that's just one idea, but that might answer. Perhaps that answers the question.
Is this similar to the issue that Brian Jones just brought up, that the zone, the notice on this property that was sent out to the public and to the property owner was for a specific VLDR zone, and so do we have the ability to change the zone at the meeting?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I agree that would likely have to go back to Planning Commission. But both of these are first hearings, so we have more flexibility in continuing them. And I just, at least for me, I would hate to weaken. I would hate to change a zone in a way that at least I don't think makes sense in order to accommodate one proposal. I would rather, even if it does require going back to the Planning Commission, not diluting our zones, but selecting the appropriate zone.
Okay.
So where are we on this particular item? Are staff clear on what you think we are asking you to do before we meet again on this item?
So yes, I think that staff understands the proposal by Mr. Harding of keeping the 4,000 square foot for LDR, but are changing it to 4,000 to LDR and keeping it 5,000 for VLDR. I think if council wanted to move in that direction, staff would still support that, and or if you wanted to continue it to study it more, we could do that as well.
Yeah, I think I would I think I'm having trouble understanding what the difference is and why you originally recommended it. So if we're going to have this item continued, I guess I'm not necessarily ready to say which. I'm just speaking for myself here. I'm not ready to say which one I prefer. I guess what sounds to me like what would be helpful is just more rationale behind the two ideas, so that I was a little more clear on it. Mr. Harding.
Thank you. So yeah, I definitely don't want to. I mean, I by rule, just one can continue it, but I also don't want to, send staff down a road to make some changes if that's not supported by the rest of the council. So I don't know if it would help to get the council's opinion on this tonight, or perhaps during the 2 weeks we can take a look at it and then give staff a better, more of a council request rather than just a single councilor request. But by the same token that was just talked about, that since the next item was noticed as VLDR, we probably shouldn't just zone it LDR. But by kind of that same flip, if the rest of the council felt comfortable, we could vote on this item 13 today, and accept the whole proposal except for not lowering the VLDR from 4,000 to 5,000 to 4,000, because that is less, it's less intense. So by that logic, we could do that if we felt comfortable doing that tonight. But if we want to take more time to look at it, then obviously we would have that time if it's continued.
Mr. Strachan has a comment.
So, Mr. Harding, the question is, are you suggesting that, I guess there's a couple ways of doing this. If you felt like you wanted to do a test vote to see if the council wants to support it as is, you could indicate such that by asking, kind of polling them, or you could just do a motion to return it and see if it's turned down. But if you're proposing to advance it, but with but not change a number, I guess one of the questions is there support for not changing the number?
Right.
In other words, I guess the question I have is, if you send it back for 2 weeks and it comes back, would that materially change how the rest of the council would vote tonight if they wanted to approve it? I'm just curious.
And to follow on to Cliff's thought, I guess I would say it seems like the way to maybe advance the discussion on that is to make a motion to strike the amendment to that number and see if that motion passes with regard to the exhibit.
Yeah, what he said.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds good to me. So, and again, I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes or push something through. I'm happy to take more time on this, but I'm also happy to move it along if we can. So I would love to propose, I move that we change the implied motion so that it is what was recommended by the Planning Commission and staff, and just change the minimum lot size for single family detached to remove that reduction from 5,000 to 4,000 in the VLDR only, so that it will remain on the LDR but not VLDR. And that is my motion.
All right, Ms. Ellsworth.
I have a question and comment, so it's not relevant necessarily to this specific motion.
Do you want to wait?
Yeah, I'll wait a second.
Okay, is there a second on that motion? Mr. Sewell?
Yes, I would like to second that for all the reasons that Mr. Harding has explained. I think it makes sense to kind of keep those two zones a little bit distinct in the way that they handle density. So
I'm curious to know why, if from the staff's point of view, whether or not that's a good idea.
I think we're okay theoretically with that change. I think it complicates the next item. But I guess that might be a separate issue if we're just looking at this language right now.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yeah, my question is about the next agenda item, because if the applicant applied when the zone looked differently, then we have to go by what the zone was when they applied. Isn't that right? We don't get to change the zone after they've applied.
You can if you're changing it to a less dense zone. That would be consistent with Mr. Jones' counsel earlier in his meeting on another item. But if you're changing it to a zone after it's been in planning commission to a more dense zone, we've always sent that back to planning commission.
And I'm not even talking about changing the zone necessarily. I'm just talking about the parameters of the zone that they applied for. Can we change the parameters of a zone that they applied for and it would impact their previous application?
They would have to go back and change to an LDR request because of the lot size that they're proposing.
No, but her question is more conceptual over the propriety of changing a zone after somebody's applied for that zone. Is that correct, Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes.
I'm going to punt that to Brian Jones. Sorry, Brian.
No, you're fine. Is it a general question or as applied to this specific situation, I guess is my first question.
Well, I believe generally I know the answer, but I'm curious. I mean, both.
Because if I'm following this, which I may not be, the issue here is that the applicant is actually asking for both this change and the subsequent rezone, correct? And so what Mr. Harding is proposing is to reject one of their proposed changes, which would make their application still subject to what is currently the law because it will not have been changed.
Oh.
Mr. Sewell?
I think that answered my question.
If I can, just clarify, So the applicant, I think ideally would apply for a text amendment change, and then once that happens, then they would come in, follow it with a proposal for the zone change. But they did it at the same time. But what they're proposing doesn't fit the zone that they're asking for as the zone currently exists, but only if we adopted those changes. And so we're not taking anything away from them. We're just not granting them everything that they asked for.
And so for John's benefit, since he's got the ordinance open in on-base, let me just clarify one thing and say, as I understood the motion, the practical import of the motion, if it were to pass, is that at line 35 in the ordinance, the reference to 14.14F.030 would be deleted. And then the second half of Exhibit B would be deleted, so that the entire part of Exhibit B that refers to the lot standards for VLDR zone would just be deleted, because nothing in that section would be being changed. Does that sound right, Mr. Harding, based on?
Yes, I didn't follow everything, but that's the gist of it. Is just we would leave the minimum lot area for one family detached in the VLDR where it's at currently.
Okay. Mr. Shipley.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time understanding what the reasoning was for the change other than the applicant's property. And so I guess I'm just not ready to make a decision. I just don't understand what the, beyond this applicant and making this applicant's property work, what was the planning reason for, having this apply to all, developments within this zone going forward, to have the new standard. I just am not clear on the reasoning there.
I think the planning commission felt like it made sense for, if we are trying to achieve infill development in the pioneer neighborhoods, that a 4,000 square foot lot made more sense to achieve that end. Infill units in an established neighborhood where the infrastructure is already there and you don't have to build more infrastructure to accommodate that growth. It's very similar to the discussion about the accessory apartment. The accessory apartment is a way to increase density in a single family area without having to upgrade infrastructure. Same type of principle.
Mr. Harding.
Thank you. And I fully agree and support that effort and that logic. But I do think we already have a tool for that in the LDR. If that's what we're trying to achieve, then we can achieve that with the LDR. And for areas that we want, and we had the LDR for a very long time, and we can use that. We just barely created a VLDR, which is just like the LDR with less density. And so then I don't want to necessarily, as we make adjustments to the LDR, make the VLDR match that. I think it's good to have both tools. And so where it makes sense to use that for infill, then let's put the LDR on it. And if there's an area that, I want to keep those tools separate. But I agree.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion of the motion? All right, so we will vote on the motion, and I'll start with Mr. Harding.
I will vote yes.
Ms. Ellsworth.
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore.
Yes.
Mr. Hoven.
Yes.
Mr. Sewell.
Yes.
Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
And I will vote yes, so that's unanimous.
Okay, let's make that change before we go and vote on the implied motion. So John, if you can go to line 35. Yeah, and change that to, so it says Provo City Code section 14.14F.020 is hereby amended. That's probably what you've done, but it's so small on my screen I can't read it. So if you've done that, and then go to Exhibit B, if you haven't already, and delete 14.14F.030 and all of its contents from the exhibit. Okay. So that should now reflect the motion and be ready to be voted upon.
So now we vote on the implied motion, or on
right. The implied motion to approve the now amended ordinance.
Okay. All right. So is there any discussion on that vote before I call for a vote? All right. I will call for a vote then on the implied motion as amended. And I'll begin with Ms. Ellsworth.
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore.
Yes.
Mr. Hoban.
Yes.
Mr. Sewell.
Yes.
Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mr. Harding.
Yes.
And voting is unanimous. Okay. So now we turn to item number 14. Which is an implied motion on an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 0.25 acres of real property generally located at 189 South, 500 West, from residential conservation RC to very low density residential VLDR in the Franklin neighborhood. And this is Brandon Lars. Mr. Larson, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Could we ask for a continuance on this item so we can work with the applicant to revise his application?
Yeah, I assume that's what we would need to do.
Right.
Mr. Jones, is there anything?
No, there's, I'm trying to think through, we had a discussion a while back about continuing items before the presentation that have been scheduled, but that had to do with items that had actually been scheduled by the council to appear on that agenda, where this one's coming from the Planning Commission. I think that you have the authority by motion to just go ahead and continue it at this time.
Okay. I do notice Mr. Rands is available for comment and wants to make a comment. Let me just ask Mr. Sewell had his hand raised, and then I'd like to give Mr. Rands an opportunity to speak. Go ahead, Mr. Sewell.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. So I gathered from our earlier discussion that the applicant's proposal was going to depend on having a 5,000 square foot lot instead of 4,000, but what was just on the screen, I thought it said 5,000. So I'm confused as to whether we really, yeah, right there.
Yeah, that language is from his original proposal. Again, he's been through a process through a few meetings now. Originally, he proposed 5,000 square feet, 5,000 square foot lot, or he proposed two 5,000 square foot lots. And then, as you remember, I don't know if you can, probably can't see it, but you'll remember back where the existing shed is, he had a kind of a weird, an oddly shaped kind of protrusion for his lot there. And it seemed like the Planning Commission and City Council wanted to see something a little more straightforward. And so then we went back to the drawing board, went back as staff and prepared a text amendment that we felt was in harmony with kind of the direction we received from both the Planning Commission and the City Council. And so that's kind of where we were at. Again, his original proposal was two 5,000 square foot lots, but after the configuration issue, he went back and prepared something a little more straightforward based on the text amendment you just heard.
All right, Mr. Rands, would you like to speak? Go ahead.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, fantastic. Great to know. Hey, thanks for everyone's patience. I know this has been a really long evening. Following the ins and outs of this and where you just voted, a question is for the council's attorney, Mr. Jones. Is there a mechanism, either ordinance language or something in the procedure or the rules here, where we could just change my app from a VLDR to an LDR? It sure would facilitate the process. I mean, that's basically what in fact, I originally wanted a LDR, but it was suggested to me that I change it to a VLDR, excuse me, a VLDR, which would imply a single family detached house. But I'm perfectly willing to do a single family detached house on a LDR. It makes no difference to me how it's zoned, is just as long as the 4,000 minimum square foot is maintained. And so I think that would make sense. But if you need us to resubmit and go through the Planning Commission and then to the council again, I get that if that's the rule. But it seems like if we're all in concurrence that LDR 4,000 would work, let's go ahead and do that if it's possible. That's all.
And that makes a lot of sense. I think the problem comes from the rule that I stated earlier in the meeting. I don't know if you were listening at that time, that the LDR zone is more permissive than the VLDR, and that wasn't what as I understand it, at least, it wasn't what the Planning Commission considered. So I think it does need to go back to Planning Commission. Now, planning staff could certainly work with you. It may be I'll defer to them, but it may be very easy for them to do that without requiring any kind of new submission, and just put you on the very next meeting and have you right back in front of the council.
Right.
With just that slight change. But I'd defer to planning staff on how to accomplish that.
Yeah, it'd be very easy to change our staff reports and renotice this. It'd be very simple.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Harding.
So here's a wrinkle that I hadn't considered before, but Mr. Jones, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, as well as development services. We talk about what's more permissive, but if the Planning Commission was considering lowering VLDR to 4,000 square feet, and so if they've already recommended that, and they've recommended this rezone on the premise of the 4,000 square feet, could we not say that they basically have already reviewed it and said that 4,000 square feet, they recommended it. So that's basically what we're doing, but we're doing it with the LDR because we didn't lower the VLDR. Could we not make an argument that they've already given their blessing on a 4,000 square foot lot?
I think you're right that they have already given their blessing on a 4,000 square foot lot, and therefore to a 5,000 square foot lot, which would be, well, I guess the 4,000 square foot lot under the LDR. So I get what you're saying there. The one thing I think they haven't considered, and maybe development services can tell us that this is inapplicable, even though they haven't considered it. But what they haven't considered is the density permissions in the LDR versus the VLDR, as far as the number of units in density. But maybe that's inapplicable to this small parcel, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Can I ask for development services thoughts on approving this as an LDR tonight, because Planning Commission's already weighed in on a 4,000 square foot lot, and do you know if Mr. Jones's concerns about opening up something with an LDR makes sense on a lot that is this small?
Yeah, I would love to see it get approved under that rationale and move forward. I just would point out to the council that in the LDR zone, the minimum lot size to be able to start putting in townhouses is 10,000 square feet. And this gentleman has 10,000 square feet. So as long as everybody understands that's that minimum threshold in the zone, I'm confident that he wants to keep his house and wants to just create one more lot. But I just want people to understand that one nuance to that LDR zone.
The neighborhood, this was put forward to the neighborhood, and I think the neighborhood is well aware of the desire to have a smaller lot size. So that I don't think this density is anything new to the neighborhood.
Mr. Rance, would you like to comment?
Sure. My intention this whole time was to create a lot out of the rather large backyard. I have no intention of tearing down the existing house. It's really kind of cool, and it's historic, and it's like 107 years old. And so it's not, so I get the point was very well taken, that if this were to pass as you're describing it, we could raise the whole place and build condos, but that's not my thing. I'm not, like someone else recognized very readily before, I'm not a full-time developer, but I've done some very small projects. And this is a really interesting one, just to build kind of a pioneer heritage house that's totally consistent with the long-term plan and the neighborhood characteristics, right? So that's, but I don't know if you'd need to signed affidavit or something, but I have no intention of tearing things down and building a complex. Thanks.
Ms. Ellsworth, Mr. Jones, did you want to comment?
Well, I just try and decide whether to hold my tongue. I was in a couple of meetings earlier today and yesterday where I made the comment that it's been my long experience that when we deviate from standard procedure to try to help people, it usually comes back to bite us. So I totally understand the applicant's desire, and I get what Bill's saying. And this is one of those situations where it seems to me the chances of things going wrong are very, very slim. But I think what's been articulated in the last 2 minutes are exactly why we don't usually do more permissive changes without going back to Planning Commission, because the possibility at least exists. And we have, we've had situations in the past, 10 years during my time and in the past 20 years before my time, where almost exact things exactly like this have been said in council meeting, and then the day after the zone change, somebody goes broke and sells the property, right? And then the next person does something completely different from what the original plan was. So that just gives me a little bit of pause, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah. In light of what Mr. Jones said, I think we should go through the proper steps. But if there is anything we can do for the developer to advance or speed up this process, I would be in favor of that, just because we've been changing the rules on the developer. He's been trying to accommodate us, and I just hate to, throw him another curveball. So,
Mr. Rands.
Yeah, just to be honest, I mean, my full-time job is with the federal government. I'm very used to procedures and slow movement forward and whatnot. But of course, if we all have the general idea that we want to move this forward and facilitate it as fast as possible, if assuming that there is a concurrence that we want to have some infill and some more single-family homes and whatnot, I don't mind. It seems to me the solution, if we can't do it tonight, it'll be really as simple as amending my application to be LDR. And I don't know if the Planning Commission or the staff can restrict that to just single family within that zone designation. But there's just got to be a pretty simple way to make it work. It seems like everyone wants to approve 4,000 minimum, and my concept plan calls for like 4,500 and change. It seems like everyone's in concurrence. We just got to find the right mechanism for it. So anyway, thanks for your support. I appreciate it. It's pretty clear you're going to want me to go back to staff, and I have no problem with doing that. They're super helpful and supportive through the whole thing. But this will be the third time coming to the well. So thanks.
Mr. Rand, if things are getting time sensitive for you, there are some things that we can do in development services that will buy back some time that you still have to go through the development approval process. So if that's helpful, I'd be happy to visit with you about those things we can do to help you get some time back.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Sewell. I think you're muted. Or at least we don't hear you. It says you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Still nothing. Okay. Mr. Jones, maybe you can help, or Mr. Strachan, but I'm a little confused, speaking of deviating from normal patterns. We haven't actually, there are 3 callers who I don't know if they're listening and want to comment, but we sort of amended this proposal or talked about doing so without any public comment. So I'm wondering what you would advise.
Well, at this point, what you actually have on the table, I think, is a request from staff to continue the item. There's been some discussion about whether it needs to be continued or not. My recommendation would be to do that and to let staff go back and work with the applicant. And by way of, while I have the microphone, just mention to him that when he was asking about what the different mechanisms were, one thing you may want to ask staff about is to walk you through what a development agreement is and how we might do a very simple, almost right off the template development agreement that just has one sentence in it that says what it is you're going to build as far as single family homes. And that would be easy, really easy to solve the one problem that's been mentioned during this discussion. But anyway, at this point, I think the easiest way to go forward and the legally permissible way is for a council member to make a motion to continue this so that can happen. And such a motion could be made and voted on without opening it up for public discussion. Now, as a political matter, if the council feels like they want to hear comments from those callers who were on the line, if they have comments, you certainly can open it up, but there's no reason why you couldn't continue it without taking comment. And in some ways that makes sense if what's going to come back may not even be the same thing. But I'll leave that up to you, Chair Handley, about whether you want to take comment or not.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sewell.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we continue this till our next meeting along the lines of what's been discussed. And the other comment I had was already covered by Mr. Jones, just suggesting that there be a super simple development agreement, which it sounded like the applicant has basically already offered.
Okay. Is there a second on that?
Second that.
Harding, any discussion of the motion? All right, seeing none, I will call for a vote. I will vote first and I will vote yes. Mr. Harding?
Yes.
Mr. Hoban?
Let's do this. Yes.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Fillmore?
Yes.
Mr. Sewell?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
Okay, that voting is unanimous. And I will ask if there were citizens who wanted to comment on this item. I apologize, but I think we will welcome comment at our next meeting or in between if there's desire to send any emails. But because we're potentially changing the conversation a little bit, it might be better to wait for that moment. So, if I'm not mistaken, does that bring us to the end? So if there is no objection, we will now adjourn the Provo Municipal Council meeting by unanimous consent. Long and productive day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
For being for an extra week. Take care.